Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise to get straight to the insights. You know, when we think about money, our minds often jump straight to numbers, formulas, spreadsheets, that sort of thing. But what if I told you that doing well with money has surprisingly little to do with how smart you are, and a whole lot more to do with your behavior? That's the powerful premise behind our deep dive today. We're exploring Morgan Housel's acclaimed book, The Psychology of Money. It's a guide that promises these timeless lessons on wealth, greed, and happiness. Our mission? Well, it's to extract the most important nuggets of wisdom for you, offering you a shortcut, basically, to being well-informed and better equipped for your own financial journey. And there are some truly eye-opening facts along the way. Get ready to challenge some of your deepest assumptions about money. So let's start with a really stark contrast, because it really hammers home this idea of behavior. Imagine a wildly successful tech executive, right? A certified genius who, despite immense wealth, ended up completely broke. I mean, even throwing thousands in gold coins into the ocean just for fun. Now picture Ronald Reed, a humble rural janitor, quietly amassed an $8 million fortune fixing cars, sweeping floors, lived modestly his whole life. What do you think is the fundamental difference between these really extreme financial outcomes?
It's a compelling contrast, isn't it? And it leads right to the core premise here. Financial success, or, failure, often has very little to do with raw intelligence. Yeah. It really has everything to do with how you behave. We're taught finance is, a math-based field. You plug numbers into a formula, out comes an answer. But Housel argues it's fundamentally a soft skill. It's deeply intertwined with human psychology. Just knowing the right thing to do with your money doesn't mean you'll actually do it, especially, when emotions like fear or greed kick in.
That distinction, between knowing and doing, that feels incredibly important. And it makes me think about how much our own financial worldview is actually shaped by our individual experiences, like what one person might call crazy with money.
Another sees as perfectly rational. Our personal experiences, even if they're just a tiny sliver of history, they profoundly shape our views. Think about buying a lottery ticket when you're struggling. To some, that's just fiscally irresponsible. But to someone else, maybe it's the only way. They feel they can buy a dream, a little bit of hope they wouldn't otherwise have. So this raises an important question. How can equally smart people disagree so fundamentally about how money works? It's because everyone's money map is different. The person who grew up in poverty, they perceive risk very differently than the child of a wealthy banker. And get this, the stock market's performance during your formative years, like your teens and 20s, it can actually anchor your entire view of investing for life.
Really?
Yeah. Like if you were born in 1970, the S&P 500 went up almost tenfold adjusted for inflation during those impressionable years. Huge gains. But if you're born in 1950, it went literally nowhere during that same period. Flat.
Wow.
So those varied experiences, they shape everything. How you see risk, what you prioritize, all of it.
Okay, so if behavior and personal experience are so key, how do we factor in those external forces like luck and risk? I'm thinking of Bill Gates. He had this unbelievable access to advanced computers back in 1968 at Lakeside School. Most university grad students didn't even have that. That unique timing had just profoundly shaped his path, didn't it? But then there's Kent Evans, equally skilled, driven, Gates's friend, tragically died in a mountaineering accident before Microsoft was founded. It really highlights that role of just random chance.
Those examples, they powerfully illustrate that luck and risk are, they're two sides of the same coin, but they're incredibly hard to measure or even to accept sometimes. The world is just too complex, 100% of our actions can't dictate 100% of our outcomes. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
We tend to look at others' failures and say, bad decisions, but our own setbacks. That was bad luck, the dark side of risk, that thin line between being bold and being reckless. Think of Cornelius Vanderbilt defying laws for his railroad, Benjamin Graham's super concentrated Jayako bet.
Yeah.
It's often totally invisible until hindsight makes it obvious. So it's a reminder that sometimes it's not just what you do, but when and how circumstances happen to align or don't.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. And it leads us to another fundamental struggle many of us face, knowing when we truly have enough. Yeah. John Gogol, Vanguard's founder, he once shared that Joseph Heller quip, right? At a party with a billionaire, Heller said, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough." That one word, enough, it carries so much weight.
It really does. And this raises a critical question. Why would someone like Rajat Gupta, former McKinsey CEO, worth $100 million, risk everything for more through insider trading? Or Bernie Madoff, already a legitimately successful businessman, why run a massive Ponzi scheme? These are extreme examples, sure. But they highlight the danger when ambition just completely outstrips satisfaction. When the goalpost keeps moving, like Warren Buffett said, they risked what they had and needed for what they didn't have and didn't need. Crazy, right? The crucial takeaway for us, for you listening, is that there are invaluable things, your reputation, your freedom, family, happiness, that are simply never worth risking for more money. Knowing you're enough protects those truly priceless assets.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about compounding. Often called the eighth wonder of the world, right? Our minds, they really aren't built to grasp its true exponential power. Housel uses this great analogy. Think of a tiny, almost imperceptible change in Earth's orbital tilt. It leads to slightly cooler summers, snow doesn't quite melt from the winter before. Over millennia, that tiny change compounds.
And creates massive, miles-thick ice ages. Yeah, small changes, huge results over time.
Exactly, but why is it so hard for us to intuitively get that?
It's hard because our brains tend to think linearly, not exponentially.
Yeah.
We expect steady progress, not explosive growth, after a long period of looking like nothing's happening. And that linear thinking, it often blinds us to the real key to massive wealth accumulation. If we look at Warren Buffett's, $84.5 billion fortune, the real secret isn't just his investing skill, it's his longevity.
Right.
An absolutely astonishing $81.5 billion of that net worth came after his 65th birthday.
Wow, $81.5 billion after 65.
Yep. If he'd started later or maybe retired at a normal age, very few people would likely know his name today. Even Jim Simons, right? His Renaissance Technologies had those mind-blowing 66% annual returns. Astounding.
Unbelievable returns.
But he's far less wealthy than Buffett, maybe $21 billion, mostly because he had less than half as many years for that money to compound. The lesson is pretty simple. Time in the market, letting compounding do its magic. That's your most powerful ally.
That leads to a really critical distinction then. Getting wealthy is one thing, but staying wealthy, that's another thing entirely. You see this with tragic stories like Abraham Szymanski, brilliant real estate guy, wiped out in the 29 crash, or Jesse Livermore, the legendary stock trader, made and lost fortunes multiple times, ultimately took his own life. Both masters at making money.
But terrible at keeping it.
Exactly.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture for your own finances, survival becomes the absolute cornerstone of any long-term strategy. It's paramount. Michael Moritz, the billionaire head of Sequoia Capital, he attributes their 4 decades of success to being always afraid of going out of business. That constant vigilance.
Always afraid.
You have to avoid ruin at all costs. Buffett's famous didn't do's are just as important as his brilliant investments. He didn't get carried away with debt. He didn't panic and sell during recessions. He protected his reputation fiercely. He didn't burn out.
Those didn't do's.
Yeah. Rick Guerin's story is a stark reminder here. He was supposedly just as skilled as Buffett and Munger, but he used way too much leverage, borrowed money to juice his returns, and boom, wiped out in a downturn.
Leverage. The double-edged sword.
Totally. Debt can just completely eliminate your chance of staying in the game. Doesn't matter how talented you are. You need that staying power.
It's a powerful lesson in self-preservation. Okay, and speaking of staying in the game, this next point really brings it home for me. You can actually be wrong like half the time and still make a fortune. It's called the tails you win principle. Brad Pitt actually put it well once, accepting an award. Something like, some projects work, some don't. No reason to belabor either one. Just get on to the next.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because a small minority of things, they really account for the vast majority of outcomes. It's the Pareto principle on steroids, almost. Think about Walt Disney. His whole empire was basically transformed by one movie, Snow White. After hundreds of less successful, often money-losing cartoons, one big hit.
Just one.
Or look at the stock market. Most public companies eventually experience, quote, catastrophic loss. They fail or fade away. Yet the Russell 3000 index grew, 73-fold since 1980? Why? Because a tiny handful of companies like Microsoft, Walmart, Amazon performed spectacularly well. The tails?
So the winners really carry the whole index.
Pretty much. It's the same for Chris Rock, the comedian. He tests hundreds, maybe thousands of jokes in small clubs just to find the few tails that become killer hits for his big specials. Buffett, same story. He made most of his billions on only about 10 out of the 400, 500 stocks he's owned over his career.
Only 10. Wow.
Yeah. So this means your behavior during a few critical moments, like having the temperament to not sell during a panic, or having the conviction to hold on to your big winners that can impact your lifetime returns far more than years of just average performance, or trying to perfectly pick every single winner. It's really about surviving long enough, staying invested long enough for those few big wins, those tails, to emerge and work their magic.
Okay. So we've talked about accumulating money, keeping money, but beyond just the dollars and cents, what do people truly want from it? There's research from psychologist Angus Campbell that points to one really powerful common denominator of happiness. What is it?
It's having a strong sense of controlling one's life.
Control, not a bigger salary, not a bigger house.
Nope. More than salary, house size, job prestige. It's that feeling of being in the driver's seat of your own life, that autonomy. And that's such a profound insight, right? It's something many of us kind of feel instinctively, but maybe don't always articulate. What's truly fascinating here is how money's greatest intrinsic value, and this really can't be overstated, is its ability to give you control over your time.
Control over time. Explain that more.
Well, think about it. Being able to take a few sick days without worrying you'll break the bank, or having the flexibility to wait for a genuinely good job opportunity instead of grabbing the first thing that comes along because you have to, or retiring when you want to, not just when you absolutely need to stop working. That's huge. Derek Sivers' story illustrates this perfectly. Saved $12,000 when he was 22. That allowed him to quit his $20K a year job and become a full-time musician.
Just $12,000.
Yeah. And he said the real difference in his life happened then, with that initial freedom, not years later when he sold his company for millions. It was about gaining control of his time.
It's kind of a counterintuitive thought for many, though, because we often mistakenly chase wealth to gain admiration, right? We fall into what the book calls the man in the car paradox. You see someone driving a really fancy car, a Ferrari or something, and you intuitively think, wow, they must be rich.
Right. You admire the car.
But all you really know is they have $100,000 or whatever it costs, less than they did before they bought it, or maybe $100,000 more in debt. We confuse that visible spending with actual wealth.
And that's exactly it. That hits the nail on the head. If we connect this to the bigger picture, wealth is fundamentally what you don't see. It's the unspent income. It's the financial assets that haven't been converted into visible stuff. Cars, houses, clothes.
Stuff you haven't bought.
Exactly. Many people say they want to be a millionaire, but what they often really mean is they want to spend $1 million.
Which is literally the opposite.
Literally the opposite of being a millionaire. True wealth offers options, flexibility, the power to grow. Its real value lies in what it could buy, not just what it currently has bought for everyone to see.
Which brings us to a surprisingly potent and, crucially, completely controllable tool for building that unseen wealth. Just saving, even without a specific goal sometimes.
This raises an important question, though. Why is saving so often overlooked or seen as like a chore or deprivation? It's the one factor that is completely 100% in your control. Your income might fluctuate, market returns definitely fluctuate, but your savings rate, that's down to you. Housel uses the analogy of energy efficiency for the U.S. It mattered more than finding new oil sources. Same idea here. Your personal savings rate, your frugality, has a 100% chance of being effective for you. A high savings rate is fueled by closing the gap between your ego and your income. Or, but more simply, just a healthy dose of humility. Don't need to keep up with the Joneses.
Right.
And that savings provides invaluable options and flexibility down the road. That's an incalculable return that's often completely overlooked because it's not a market return. And this flexibility, this cushion, it actually becomes a powerful competitive advantage in today's hyper-connected world. Raw intelligence isn't enough anymore. Everyone's smart. That financial cushion lets you take calculated risks or wait for the right opportunities.
Okay, so if we acknowledge we're not spreadsheets, we're complex, emotional people, right? Screwed up sometimes. When it comes to money, maybe we shouldn't aim to be coldly rational all the time. Perhaps we just need to be reasonable. Is there really a distinction there?
Oh, there absolutely is. A huge one. And what's fascinating here is that the academically optimal strategies, the perfectly rational ones on paper, often just don't work in the real world. Why? Because people don't want them. They don't stick with them. People want the strategy that maximizes how well they sleep at night.
Sleep at night factor.
Exactly. Think about treating fevers. Scientifically, fevers can be beneficial, help fight infection, but we treat them because they feel bad, right? We make decisions that feel right emotionally. Investing isn't purely an intellectual exercise detached from life. It has a huge social and emotional component. So sticking with a strategy that you love, even if it's technically imperfect, can be far, far better than a supposedly rational one that you abandon the moment things get tough because the stress is just too much.
So good enough that you can actually stick with is better than perfect that you ditch.
Precisely. Consistency over flawed perfection.
That's a really refreshing perspective, and it implies we probably shouldn't trust past performance as a perfect map for the future either, right? This idea that history isn't destiny.
Exactly right. That's what Housel calls the historians as prophets fallacy. It leads us astray because investing isn't like physics with fixed laws. It's driven by human feelings, emotions, reactions, things that change.
So the past doesn't repeat exactly.
Never exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture for your planning, the world is fundamentally surprising. Unexpected things happen all the time. The most impactful economic events, think the Great Depression, 9/11, the 2008 crisis, a global pandemic, they're often complete outliers. Black swans.
Yeah.
Nearly impossible to predict. And history gives us very little guide to their future boundaries or impact. Things happen that have never happened before.
Right, which sounds kind of scary.
It can be. And this is precisely why having room for error, a margin of safety, is paramount in any financial plan. Think about a blackjack player. They know the odds, but they never bet every single chip they have on one hand, no matter how good it looks.
Need to stay in the game.
You need to stay in the game. Bill Gates famously kept a year's payroll in cash in the bank, even when Microsoft was young and growing fast, just in case. Warren Buffett consistently prioritizes a good night's sleep over squeezing out every last drop of potential profit. That buffer is key. This margin of safety, it lets you endure the inevitable volatility. It lets you stay in the game long enough for compounding to work its magic. And it protects you against all those truly unforeseeable risks. Whether it's a market crash or, as Housel humorously points out, something as weird as German tanks being defeated by field mice chewing through wires in World War II. You need buffer for the unexpected.
Field mice. Okay. It's about building resilience then. Hashtag, Resci evolving goals and hidden prices.
Resilience for an unpredictable world.
Yeah. And it's so true how unpredictable life is. But that unpredictability, it extends to us too, doesn't it? Our own selves change. Long-term planning is especially tricky because you, the planner, will change over time. Your goals will change. I have a friend, went through hell to become a doctor. Passionate about it for years. Got there, only to find the reality years later just miserable. Called it an awful career for him. It's a perfect example of how our goals can evolve.
It's a classic example of what psychologists call the end of history illusion. We all tend to do this. It's that common belief that the person we are right now is the finished product, that we won't change much more. But we consistently underestimate just how much our goals, our values, our desires will evolve over time.
We think we're done changing, but we're not.
Never are. And this insight, it suggests avoiding really extreme financial plans, especially early in life when you have less self-knowledge. Aim for balance, aim for flexibility throughout life, the ability to abandon sunk cost, to change course without feeling you wasted past efforts is crucial, like Daniel Kahneman's approach to his research ideas.
What was that?
He'd apparently just fall in love with a new idea and not worry about what he'd previously worked on. Just move on without regret. That ability to adapt to your future self is key. Don't get locked in.
That's a powerful point, adaptability. And of course, related to all this uncertainty, nothing's free in life, right? Everything has a price. The price of getting good market returns, it isn't always obvious, like a price tag. It's often paid in things like volatility, fear, doubt, uncertainty.
Exactly. Which raises an important question. Why do investors try so hard to avoid paying that price? That inherent fee for good long-term returns. They often confuse market volatility, the ups and downs, with being like a fine for doing something wrong, like they're being punished.
Oh, okay.
Instead of seeing it as simply the fee for admission, the cost you have to pay to get the potential long-term gains, like paying tuition for education. GE's Jack Welch, for example, he notoriously tried to shield shareholders from that fee using accounting tricks, made earnings look artificially smooth and predictable.
Avoid the bumps.
Tried to. But all that did was defer the true price. It led to a much larger fine coming due years later when the company suffered massive losses because the underlying reality couldn't be hidden forever. The market will always extract its fee, one way or another. You can't avoid it indefinitely.
You pay now or you pay later, maybe with interest.
Something like that, yeah.
And finally, we often fall prey to, well, appealing fictions. Stories we want to believe. Remember that hypothetical alien household describes observing New York City between 2007 and 2009, sees no tangible difference. Same buildings, same people, maybe even better tech. Yet during that time, U.S. households were $16 trillion poorer on paper. What actually changed?
Not the physical stuff. What changed was the narrative, the story we told ourselves about the economy, about housing prices, about risk.
The story changed.
The story changed. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, especially in financial markets, when the stakes are high and our sense of control is low, we are incredibly prone to believing stories that affirm what we want to be true. Wishful thinking takes over. We also inherently have incomplete views of the world. We don't know everything, but our brains hate gaps. So we construct these complete-sounding narratives to fill in our blind spots. We make sense of things even if the sense isn't accurate. Bubbles often form, for instance, when long-term investors get swayed by the short-term games other people are playing. They lose sight of their own goals, their own time horizon. The critical takeaway here for you listening is that you must clearly define your game. What are your goals? What's your time horizon? What's your risk tolerance? And this is the hard part, stick to it. Regardless of what other people are doing or what appealing fictions they might be telling themselves or you hear on the news, don't let someone else's story pull you away from your own path. #checkout.
So what does all of this mean for you as you navigate your own financial world? This deep dive into the psychology of money really powerfully reveals that your money journey is profoundly, deeply personal. There truly isn't a universal right way to manage money. There's just what works for you, your circumstances, your temperament.
Absolutely. Think about cultivating humility when things go well, recognizing the role of luck, and practicing forgiveness when things go wrong, recognizing the role of risk, and just, being human. Understand that incalculable power of saving. Prioritize that sleep at night comfort over some abstract notion of cold, purely rational strategies. Embrace a generous room for error in your plans, build that buffer, and most importantly, clearly define your own unique financial game and then have the discipline to stick to it. These aren't just like nice ideas. These are the crucial soft skills that truly matter in building lasting wealth and, maybe more importantly, lasting happiness.
Okay, so my final provocative thought for you to mull over, building on all this. If you already understand, or at least accept, that your own goals and desires are going to change significantly throughout your life, and you accept that the world will always surprise you with unpredictable events, how does that fundamental understanding shift the way you plan for a future that is inherently unknowable? Unknowable both in terms of what the world will bring and also what you yourself will truly desire years from now. How do you plan for that kind of double uncertainty?